here we are live once again. Good evening, folks. Welcome to Friday Night Tech Talk. I'm MobileGeezer, which you know if you're on the YouTube side on my channel. And if you're not, you're on Facebook or X. So either way, welcome. Welcome to Friday Night Tech Talk. If you're new here, please put something in the comments so I'll know you're here, and let us know where you're from. And Brian was in here over an hour ago. So Brian and Eleanor just came in, two of my most faithful. She said, everybody have a good weekend. Brian said, hey, Eleanor. So anybody else that wants to say hello, just feel free. Here's Robin. Okay, we're continuing with what from last week. Okay. Okay, if you're new here, we do this every week. Every Friday, we go over tech stories or tech articles that I found between last Friday and this Friday. And I try to find what I think are interesting stories. And if there's a big story from the week, I try to include that too, but I also try to give you guys some stories that you just won't see everywhere else. So I always put the show notes on my webpage, so let me show that to you. I'll go share screen. Okay, if you go to mobilegeezer.wordpress.com, click on today's date, you'll get just tonight's show notes. So, as I do every week when I show you the webpage and the show notes, I give you a little preview of what we're going to talk about. So, we've got a heavy-duty story, but I want to start with one. I usually try to make it the second story, the heavy-duty story, because give people time to come in. So I started with Elon's Neuralink, and you'll remember I reported, 3 or 4 months ago that they had their first patient. And so now he's actually playing games with his brain alone. So I want to touch on that story, and that's on The Verge. And and I forgot to put my earbuds in. Time out, folks. Let me see if I can get these in so you guys are not hearing my speakers. Let's see. Okay, now we've got the earbuds, so you shouldn't be hearing speakers anymore. Sorry about that. All right, so the Neuralink will be the first story. And then we got the heavy-duty one for the week, and thanks to Ted. Ted was the first one yesterday to let me know that this story was happening, and then, of course, the world had it that the DOJ and 16 attorneys general around the country are suing Apple with an antitrust suit. So I got that on The Verge also, and I followed it up. There's a CarPlay suit also. This is an 88-page suit. It's down there in the pages, so I put both of them in there, but that's the heavy-duty ones for this week. So after that, as of yesterday, MetaQuest 2, it's dropped down to below $200, and I thought that was interesting, even though I don't have it. I just thought it was interesting that you can now get that for under $200. So I put that story in there from CNET, and then I said another story about the MetaQuest, some skepticism about a rumored budget MetaQuest 3, and that's from Tech Radar, so we'll take a look at that. And then I have a story. Reddit finally has its IPO yesterday. They've been talking about doing an IPO, I think for over a year now, and they had all kinds of issues last year, but they finally had it yesterday, and I gather it was pretty successful. In my last story, I said, meanwhile, Microsoft brings in DeepMind co-founder to head the consumer AI division. So as you've been able to tell for months, Microsoft is heavy duty serious about AI. So now they have its own AI unit. So we'll go over that. And Robin is asking questions about the S24. I don't have the S24, so I can't help you with that. I still use the S23 Ultra. So, stop screen just for a minute. I believe Ted will not be in tonight because if you remember, I started last week saying he wouldn't come in, and then he did pop in. Well, he was supposed to have a function to go to, and I gather because of bad rain they had in Dallas, they canceled it until this week. So I assume he's going to that function tonight and won't be in. Of course, by some miracle, if we get Will in here, I'll certainly let you guys know. And Mike, I'm sure, is out doing his door dashing and make his money. So Robin did ask a question. Does the regular S24 have live translation like the S25? So when the call when you call, does the Galaxy have 24 have it in the regular one? And Brian says, I think it did. Yeah, Brian often knows more than I do not have the S24. So, and he makes a good suggestion. That's who to ask. Okay. So if anybody pops in, I'll certainly let you know, but it's probably going to be just me tonight, which means it's probably going to be somewhat of a quick night. So I'm going to go back to sharing screen so we can pull up the show notes. And we'll get started with the first story. So I said Elon's first Neuralink patient plays chess and more with only his brain, and this was on The Verge. So this was from yesterday, I believe. Yeah. Neuralink video shows patient using brain implant to play chess on laptop. The company's first human patient said the technology has changed his life, but that there's still a lot of work to be done. But yeah, this guy feels very, very blessed because this guy is paralyzed from the shoulders down. So he seems pretty excited. Now, if you guys go to this story, there is the video. The video is like 9 minutes long, so I'm not going to play it, but it's pretty cool. And you can see the guy's pretty happy to be able to do some things that he hadn't been able to do. He had his skiing accident, which you'll see in this story. And this was by John Porter yesterday. So let's drop this into reader view, get rid of some of these ads. Elon Musk's brain-computer interface company has released a video purporting to show the first human patient using Neuralink's brain implant to control a mouse cursor and play a game of chess. The patient, identified as 29-year-old Nolan Arbaugh, said he was injured in a diving accident 8 years ago that paralyzed him below the shoulders. So he's the perfect candidate for this. Arbaugh describes using the Neuralink implant as like using the Force from the Star Wars franchise, allowing him to just stare somewhere on the screen and move the cursor where he wants. So that's got to be pretty cool for him. Elon Musk, who founded Neuralink in 2016, retweeted the video of Arbaugh and said it demonstrated telepathy. So, and you can find the tweet out there with the 9-minute video. In addition to playing chess, Arbaugh said the Neuralink implant had also allowed him to play the video game Civilization 6 for 8 hours straight. Yeah, he played till like 2 a.m. or something. Though he was limited by having to wait for the implant to charge. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration gave Neuralink permission to conduct in-human clinical trials last year, and shortly afterwards, the company announced that it was seeking test subjects for an initial 6-year trial. So this guy Albar is the very first one to get it, and it's working for him, and he's learning as daily, I gather. The video marks the first time Neuralink has shared footage of a human using its brain implant after Musk announced in January that the first trial participant was recovering well. Yeah, from what he said in the video, he recovered quite nicely after having the technology implanted. It comes a little under 3 years after the company released a video that showed a monkey controlling an on-screen cursor to play Pong using the technology. This kind of control via a brain-computer interface isn't entirely new. The Wall Street Journal notes that in 2004, a paralyzed person was also able to move a cursor thanks to help from a brain-computer interface. But this earlier iteration of the technology wasn't able to transmit data wirelessly like Neuralink and relied on wires protruding through the skin. So now it's wireless, at least for Neuralink. The fact that Albar was able to hold a conversation while moving the cursor is also notable, according to the Wall Street Journal. So that's great. It's certainly a good starting point. Wisconsin Institute for Translational Neuroengineering co-director Kip Ludwig tells Reuters. However, he denied that the demo represents a breakthrough. Interesting. Other companies like BlackRock and Synchron have also demonstrated how paralyzed patients can use brain-computer interfaces to control electronic devices, though Synchron's less invasive approach may not be able to gather as much neural data, according to the WSJ. Paradromics and precision neuroscience are also working on brain implants to compete with Neuralink. So it seems like Neuralink's ahead at the moment. Pardon me. Neuralink has been criticized for the way it conducted its trials, with critics pointing towards a lack of transparency around elements like the number of subjects or what outcomes it's assessing. Wired notes. The company's previous experiments on monkeys have also been the subject of controversy, including reports that animals involved in the trials had to be euthanized after suffering complications, including brain bleeds, bloody diarrhea, partial paralysis, and cerebral edema. So I'm glad I didn't see those stories. Although Neuralink is initially being pitched as an assistive technology, Musk has said he eventually wants it to be implanted into perfectly healthy people to enhance their capabilities, but that's still a long ways off. Albar admitted that there's still a lot of work to be done and that the team have run into some issues, but he also said that the implant has already changed my life. That's great for him. I think that's awesome. So I think if you just go out to X and just look for Neuralink and maybe Nolan Albar, you probably find that video like that, but I'm not going to try to play it here. So just kind of a feel-good story to start with, because the perfect kind of person that the Neuralink would be perfect for, it seems like they started with the right guy. So that's story number one. Okay, nothing new in the comments. So we will continue and we'll go with our heavy hitter story of the week. Department of Justice and 16 attorneys general hit Apple with antitrust suit. So we're going to look at it on The Verge. Of course, everybody had this story by yesterday afternoon. U.S. sues Apple for illegal monopoly over smartphones. The Department of Justice claims Apple has maintained an illegal monopoly over the smartphone market by locking in customers and making experiences worse for rival products. And this is by Lauren Feiner, and this was from yesterday, obviously. So let's drop this one into review, drop some of these ads. The U.S. Department of Justice accused Apple of operating an illegal monopoly in the smartphone market in an expansive new antitrust lawsuit that seeks to upend many of the ways Apple locks down iPhones. Yeah, they're trying to make Apple make a lot of changes here. The DOJ, along with 16 state and district attorneys general, accuses Apple of driving up prices for consumers and developers at the expense of making users more reliant on its phones. The parties allege that Apple selectively imposes contractual restrictions on developers and withholds critical ways of accessing the phone as a way to prevent competition from arising, according to the release. Apple exercises its monopoly power to extract more money from consumers, developers, content creators, artists, publishers, small businesses, and merchants, among others, the Department of Justice wrote. The government points to several different ways that Apple has allegedly illegally maintained its monopoly. One, disrupting super apps that encompass many different programs and could degrade iOS stickiness by making it easier for iPhone users to switch to competing devices. The second way, blocking cloud streaming apps for things like video games that would lower the need for more expensive hardware. Third one, suppressing the quality of messaging between the iPhone and competing platforms like Android. Yeah, that's going to be a big one. Limiting the functionality is number 4. Limiting the functionality of third-party smartwatches with its iPhones and making it harder for Apple Watch users to switch from the iPhone due to compatibility issues. And the last highlight here, blocking third-party developers from creating competing digital wallets with tap-to-pay functionality for the iPhone. Apple responded to competitive threats by imposing a series of whack-a-mole contractual rules and restrictions. For years, Apple responded to competitive threats by imposing a series of whack-a-mole contractual rules and restrictions that have allowed Apple to extract higher prices from consumers, impose higher fees on developers and creators, and to throttle competitive alternatives from rival technologies, DOJ Antitrust Division Chief Jonathan Cantor said in a statement. The case is being filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of New Jersey, my home state. Attorneys General from New Jersey, Arizona, California, Connecticut, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Tennessee, Vermont, Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia joined the DOJ in the complaint. So that's everybody who jumped in. The enforcers are asking the court to stop Apple from using its control of app distribution to undermine cross-platform technologies such as super apps and cloud streaming apps, prevent it from using private APIs to undermine cross-platform technologies like messaging, smartwatches, and digital wallets, and keep it from using the terms and conditions of its contracts with developers, accessory makers, consumers, or others to obtain, maintain, extend, or entrench a monopoly. They also asked the court for any other relief needed to restore competition. They're saying restore competition. I don't think Apple's ever had any competition in most of these, so I don't think it's restore competition. It would be the first time they've had it, I think. On a background call with reporters, DOJ officials would not address if they would seek to break up Apple if it wins the liability stage. They said any relief would need to be tied to what the court ultimately finds Apple to be liable for. At a press conference on Thursday announcing the lawsuit, Department of Justice Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco said that Apple has maintained a chokehold on competition and smothered an entire industry through its shift from revolutionizing the smartphone market to stalling its advancement. Cantor added that Apple was a significant beneficiary of the DOJ suit against Microsoft over 20 years ago. Yeah, I think everybody remembers that one. And this case aims to protect competition and innovation for the next generation of technology. So they keep comparing it to the Microsoft, which the U.S. government did win over them. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland acknowledged the resource imbalance with the government is up against facing a company worth trillions of dollars. When you have an institution with a lot of resources that, in our view, is harming the American economy and the American people, it's important for us to allocate our resources to protect the American people, Garland said. And that is certainly the case where individual Americans have no ability to protect themselves. So to me, that they're kind of following along what the European Union is doing. And even this article mentioned that the European Union is kind of ahead. In a statement, Apple spokesperson Fred Saints said the lawsuit threatens who we are and the principles that set Apple products apart in fiercely competitive markets. And the only reason I knew how to pronounce Fred Saints' name is there's a Formula One driver named Saints who drives for Ferrari, or he did until this year anyway. And that's why I knew how to pronounce that name. If successful, it would hinder our ability to create the kind of technology people expect from Apple, where hardware, software, and services intersect. It would also set a dangerous precedent, empowering government to take a heavy hand in designing people's technology. So this is all Apple's point of view. We believe this lawsuit is wrong on the facts and the law, and we will vigorously defend against it. Apple plans to move to dismiss the case, and Apple's spokesperson told reporters in a background briefing with several news outlets on Thursday. The company also disagrees with the relevant market the DOJ defined for the case, believing it should be the global smartphone market, not just the U.S. one, a spokesperson said. Apple is the second tech giant the DOJ has taken on in recent years after filing two separate antitrust suits against Google over the past two administrations. Yeah, they're still ongoing. It's reversed a long drought of tech monopolization cases since the landmark Microsoft lawsuit at the turn of the century. The case has been years in the making, with reports first surfacing in June 2019 that the DOJ would get to handle antitrust investigations into the company. App developers for Apple's iOS have complained for years about the platform's closed and often opaque marketplace. That's very true. Among the most vocal have been companies like Spotify, here very vocal, which run paid subscription services that Apple requires a 15 to 30% cut of to be offered on its platform. On top of that, Apple has its own apps that compete with those on its App Store. The only place Apple lets users download apps for what it says are security reasons, which has raised even more distrust among developers about whether they are getting a fair shot in the marketplace. The House panel found Apple had a monopoly over iOS app distribution. Some developers were able to get the ear of Congress as a House subcommittee carried out its own investigation of the tech giants a few years ago. A 2020 report by that panel found that Apple held monopoly power in the market for app distribution on iOS. Lawmakers introduced legislation like the Open App Markets Act and the American Innovation and Choice Online Act that sought to prevent large platforms like Apple from giving their own products an advantage on their marketplaces over competitors. But more than 2 years since they were introduced, neither has received a vote on the floor of either chamber, so they just kind of stalled in limbo. Europe has moved ahead of the U.S. in its efforts to rein in tech. That's what I said. It's instituted new rules through the Digital Markets Act, and I've reported a lot on the Digital Markets Act, to place a check on the power of gatekeepers of large platforms, several of which are operated by Apple. Earlier this month, the European Commission fined Apple 1.84 billion euros, about $2 billion, in connection to a complaint from Spotify about its restrictive App Store practices, and I reported on that at the time. The EU said its investigation found that Apple bans music streaming bans music streaming app developers from fully informing iOS users about alternative and cheaper music subscription services available outside the app. Yep. Yeah, we gave you the details on that one. The Department of Justice will have its hands full with tech monopoly suits in the coming years. It wraps up closing arguments in its search distribution case against Google in May, and then is set to begin trial in a case over Google's advertising technology in the fall. So we have lots more of these kind of cases to look forward to, is my guess. So that was the heavy story of the week. But we're going to go on to the second part of this, because I said CarPlay is also included, and this is also on the verge, but it's kind of a separate story, so I wanted to let you guys see that too, since CarPlay is so popular. Apple CarPlay is anti-competitive. Oh, wait, I should check my comments here. Oh, we've got Annette. Annette, glad you're here. We've got Renz. Renz, glad you guys are here, as always. Okay, and that's asking how Renz and the family is. Good. Yeah, our prayers were with you there, and still are, actually. Okay. Okay. So back to Apple CarPlay. Apple CarPlay is anti-competitive too, a U.S. lawsuit alleges. The company's popular phone mirroring service allows Apple to exert too much control over the auto industry and stifle competition, prosecutors allege. And this one's by Andrew J. Hawkins, and of course also from yesterday. So we're going to drop this into review also. Buried in the 88-page antitrust lawsuit filed by the U.S. Department of Justice against Apple is a reference to everyone's favorite phone projection system, CarPlay. The DOJ says that, like smartphones, vehicle infotainment systems have become a new way in which Apple exhibits anti-competitive behavior to harm consumers as well as its competitors. Apple plans to introduce a more immersive version of CarPlay in which the system displays key aspects of the vehicle's functions like speed and HVAC are further evidence of the company's illegal monopoly over smartphones, prosecutors say. Infotainment systems have become a new way in which Apple exhibits anti-competitive behavior. See, I never thought of CarPlay as anti-competitive, but we'll see if they can prove their case. By applying the same playbook of restrictions to CarPlay, Apple further locks in the power of the iPhone by preventing the development of other disintermediating, that's a tough one, technologies that interoperate with the phone but reside off device. The lawsuit says the inclusion of CarPlay, as well as digital key functions through Apple's wallet feature, came as a surprise to some analysts who say that the DOJ may be misunderstanding the utility and functions of the phone mirroring system. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought CarPlay would be part of this either. This is especially true for the next generation version, which prosecutors described insidiously as taking over all the screen sensors and gauges in a car. Never thought of it that way. Forcing users to experience driving as an iPhone-centric experience if they want to use any of the features provided by CarPlay. Now, I've used Android Auto more than I've used CarPlay, but I've used CarPlay, and I've never felt like it just took over everything, but that's what they're claiming. That's misleading, said Sam Abelsamid, principal analyst at Guidehouse Insights and an expert on vehicle software. I agree with him. I think it is misleading. Pardon me. Even with the next-gen system, OEMs don't actually have to let Apple take over all the screens. Yeah, I never had them take over all the screens in the car I was in. They can limit the interface to whichever screens they want. So the car manufacturers can control what Apple takes over screen-wise. Automakers still need to build a basic software interface so vehicle owners can adjust their air conditioning, change the radio station, or operate native navigation maps, Abul Samid said. Abul Samid, okay. They can't assume every vehicle owner has a smartphone, let alone an iPhone, that they'll project on their car's infotainment screen. And the car needs to be able to function in the absence of a smartphone. By preventing the development of other disintermediating technologies. Also, there's no cost to the consumer for switching to Android Auto, the other popular phone mirroring service owned by Google. And even in vehicles that feature Google's Android software natively, owners aren't prevented from using CarPlay if they want. Yeah, I've been in cars because I work for Enterprise 3 days a week. I've been in cars where I've used both. Apple CarPlay is immensely popular with broad swaths of Americans citing it as a must-have for future car purchases. Yeah, people love their CarPlay. I know that. But of course, I know people who love their Android Auto too. Only General Motors has made the decision to cut off access to all phone mirroring services. I'm sure Apple wasn't pleased about that for its electric vehicles, citing a desire for a more holistically integrated software experience. Interesting. The move has proven to be very unpopular with car shoppers. I'm not a bit surprised. GM may also have cut off access to CarPlay for reasons other than holistic integration. The company likely balked at sharing data with Apple. This makes more sense, which was working on its own secretive car project for over a decade. That work, known as Project Titan, came unceremoniously to an end last month. That's right, no more Apple Car, which could ultimately lead GM to reconsider its decision. Abul Samid said, I'm thinking GM will probably reconsider. Digital keys also make a cameo in the Justice Department's lawsuit. The keys, which use a phone's near-field communication or ultra-wideband technology to lock, unlock, or start a car, is another cross-platform technology used by Apple to cement its dominance in the smartphone market, DOJ says. Prosecutors use the example of Apple requiring developers to add digital keys developed for their own apps to Apple Wallet in order to function. So, yeah, they're being forced, I would say. Even with the next-gen system, OEMs don't actually have to let Apple take over all the screens. The default status of Apple Wallet steers users to an Apple Wallet rather than allowing third parties to present digital car keys only in their own cross-platform app, increasing dependence on Apple and the iPhone whenever they use their car. The complaint reads, that makes sense. At the same time, it decreases the incentives of automakers to innovate because automakers are forced to share data with Apple and prevented from differentiating themselves as they could absent Apple's conduct. Apple's digital key technology companies with the standards established by a cross-industry consortium of automakers and tech companies, Apple Samid notes. Still, the company has been tight-fisted with access to its NFC and UWB chips, and its requirements that it operate through Apple Wallet probably has more of an impact on other payment apps than apps developed by the auto. Yeah, that's the one I would see would be really problematical. Mike Ramsey, a vice president at Gartner, said if Apple makes digital keys work really well, it could be a win for consumers despite running afoul of the law. Yeah, but if they run afoul of the law, that's not going to be good for anybody. The tension here is that Apple's raison d'etre, I don't know how to say that, raison d'etre, I guess, is a low-friction, easy-to-use experience and forcing apps to integrate into its secure Apple Wallet system ensures a better consumer experience, Ramsey says. Of course, it also helps give Apple control over digital key apps in a way that seems anti-competitive. Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to put the Apple Car part of that in there because it's like another heavy-duty part of this whole thing. So those are my two big antitrust stories against Apple for this week. It's very, very interesting. Let me take a look. Let's see. Okay, Renz is off to work. All right. Yeah, Renz is always off to work on Saturday mornings. He is 12 hours ahead of us ahead of me right now in the Philippines. So Ren says thanks for the prayers. Absolutely. Okay. And Renz is always very kind. Thank you, sir. Really, really appreciate it. You have a blessed weekend. Okay. Back to our stories. So back to sharing screen. So that was our heavy hitter stories for this week. Now we're going to probably give you some stories that you haven't heard everywhere else. Let me take a quick sip here. Okay, this one I just thought it was an interesting story. MetaQuest 2 now at a bargain, $199. This was on CNET. And I just thought there might be people using the MetaQuest 2. A lot of people seem to like the MetaQuest 2, especially because it was cheaper than the 3, but now it's even cheaper. So let's take a look. Meta drops Quest 2 price below $200. $199 is an absurdly good price for a still good standalone VR headset, but is the Quest 3 Lite around the corner? This is by Scott Stein, also from yesterday. So let's go into review. How much would you pay for a VR headset? Apple says $3,499. Meta, meanwhile, has a starting price of $199, the cost of a Vision Pro battery replacement. The MetaQuest 2 got a surprise price drop below $200 on Thursday, fueling speculation that a new headset might be on its way soon. Okay. And Brian, as always, faithful as he is, he also always gives me a donation. Thank you, guys. Okay. The MetaQuest 2 has been seen as editor's choice VR headset for years, mainly because it's totally standalone, plays a ton of games, can also be used for surprisingly effective fitness apps. That would push me in that direction then. Can be used as a work device with mixed results and can connect to PCs as well. The Quest 2's price dropped to $250 over the holidays, but a new price drop puts it at $199. That's for a model with 128 gigabytes of storage, which is enough to download dozens of apps. That's great. We loved it at $250, and that feeling's even stronger now. One word of caution, though, a newer model with a low price could be right around the corner. And I have another story to follow this one up too. Walmart is offering an additional deal of $50 MetaQuest store credit along with the lower price. So you get the $199 and then you get a $50 MetaQuest store credit, making it an even better buy. It's even available on Amazon for $199, but with no store credit. Will Meta be readying a replacement soon? Reports are growing that a lower-cost version of the newer MetaQuest 3, which arrived last fall, will offer up mixed reality features while cutting a few Quest 3 functions. Now, keep in mind, that's $500, and possibly being sold without controllers. However, even if that does happen, it's hard to believe it'll be anywhere near as affordable as $199. That's probably true. The Quest 2 debuted in 2020, and its display resolution and pass-through cameras aren't as good as the Quest 3, but it still does a lot of things remarkably well, even if Meta never released another game or app for the Quest 2. It would be a fantastic buy, at $199 for anyone interested in exploring hundreds, that's good to know, of compelling games and apps. The Quest 2 also supports hand tracking, which means it works with or without included controllers. That's interesting. I didn't know that. So I'm thinking that $190 is a pretty attractive price, especially for those of us who may think about it as a first-time buyer. So just interesting story. But I do have a kind of a follow-up story here. So I said, and some skepticism about a rumored budget MetaQuest 3. So as they talked about. So let's see. And this one's on Tech Radar. So let's see. Now we get some skepticism. A cheaper MetaQuest 3 might be coming, but trust me, it won't look like the leaks. And this is by Hamish Hector from 2 days ago. I am not convinced by the MetaQuest 3 Lite leaks. So into review, get rid of these ads. Over the past few days, we've been treated to 2 separate MetaQuest 3 leaks, or more accurately, leaks for a new, cheaper Quest 3. Keep in mind, we're talking cheaper than $500. That's either called the MetaQuest 3S or MetaQuest 3 Lite, depending on who you believe. But while the phrase "where there's smoke, there's fire" can often ring true in the world of tech leaks, I'm having a really tough time buying what I've seen so far from the 2 designs. Going in chronological order, the first to drop was the MetaQuest 3 Lite render shared by ZGF Tech on Twitter. It looks an awful lot like an Oculus Quest 2 with its slightly bulkier design, perhaps because it seems to use the 2's Fresnel lens system instead of a slimmer pancake lens system like the Quest 3, but with more rounded edges to match its namesake. Interestingly, it also lacks any kind of RGB cameras. Well, that's not good. Or a depth sensor. That's really not good. Which for me is a massive red flag. I agree. It's like, how can you not have a depth sensor? Mixed reality is the main focus for XR hardware and software right now. So of all the downgrades to make for the Lite, removing full color AMOLED pass-through seems like the most absurd. I agree. It'd be much more likely for Meta to give the Quest 3 Lite a worse display or chipset. I agree with him completely. As ZGF Tech did later clarify that they aren't saying the Quest 3 Lite lacks RGB cameras. Well, that's good. Just that their renders exclude them because they can't reveal more at the moment. So they must be under some kind of NDA, I would think. Though, as I've said before, I expect mixed reality would be a key Quest 3 Lite feature. So I'm more than a little surprised this detail is shrouded in mystery. Yeah, me too. Then there's the MetaQuest 3S leak. The original Reddit post has since been deleted, but copies like this Twitter post remain online. Just like the MetaQuest 3 Lite leak design, this bulkier headset suggests a return to Fresnel lenses, which make it bulkier. Although, unlike the previous model, we see some possible RGB cameras good and sensors on the front face panel. Well, that's good. On top of this, we also get some more details about specs, chiefly that the cheaper Quest 3 could boast dual 1832 by 1920 pixel displays. But while the design seems a little more likely, if a little too ugly, the leak itself is setting off my BS detectors. The first issue is that the shared images include elements of a Zoom call that might make it quite easy to determine who the leaker is. Yeah. To see these early designs, the leaker likely had to sign an NDA. I said there's probably an NDA involved here. That would come with some kind of financial penalty for sharing the info. And unless they have zero care for their financial well-being, I would have expected them to be a lot more careful with what they don't share, lest they face the wrath of Meta's well-funded legal team. On top of this, some of the promotional assets seem a little off. Some of them feature the original Quest 3 rather than the new design. Yeah, that's not good. Some of the images don't seem super relevant to a VR gadget. Plus, ports and buttons seem to change positions and parts change color across various renders. This doesn't sound like it's a very good render. As such, I'm more than a little unconvinced that this is a genuine leak. I would agree. I guess the follow-up question from my skepticism over these leaks is a cheaper MetaQuest 3 even on the way? And that's what everybody's wondering. Inherently, the idea isn't absurd. The Quest 3 may be cheaper than many other VR headsets, but at $499.99 or $500, it's pricier than the Quest was at launch. And its affordable price point is the central reason the Quest 2 sold phenomenally well. And now it'll probably sell even better since it's cheaper. I've previously estimated that the Quest 3 is selling slightly slower than its predecessor did at the same point in its lifespan. So Meta may be looking to juice its figures by releasing a cheaper model. What's more, these leaks have details that leave me more than a little skeptical. I love this picture, by the way. These details that leave me more than a little skeptical. The fact that we have had 2 leaks in such a short stretch of time leaves me feeling like there might be some validity to the rumors. Great picture, I think. So while we can't yet say for certain it's coming, I wouldn't be surprised if Meta announced a Quest 3 Lite or S. I'm just not convinced it'll look like either of these leaked designs. For me, the focus would be on having a sleek mixed reality machine, which would require full color pass-through and pancake rather than Fresnel lenses. It sounds like the Fresnel is just too bulky, which we have seen on affordable XR hardware like the Pico 4. The cost savings would then come from having lower resolution displays, which would make sense to me. Less storage, starting at 64, and that might be a problem, I think, and having a worse chipset or less RAM than we see in the Quest 3. We'll have to wait and see if Meta announces anything officially. I expect we won't hear anything until either its MetaQuest Gaming Showcase for 2024, which is due around June, or this year's Meta Connect event, which usually lands around September or October. So we might be waiting a little while to even find out if the cheaper MetaQuest 3 is on the way. So those are the 2 Meta stories. So it seems to me the MetaQuest 2 dropping to that price is going to be a big attraction for a lot of people, and maybe even me later on. Who knows? So just interesting stuff. Nothing new in the comments. Let me take a quick sip. All right, we shall go on with the stories. I've got 2 stories left. So yeah, I was surprised to see this yesterday because I know Reddit's been trying to have an IPO for I think more than a year. So I just said Reddit finally has its IPO. And this all happened yesterday, and this is from CNBC. Reddit pops 48% in New York Stock Exchange debut after selling shares at top of range. This is from yesterday, of course, by Jonathan Vinian. I think it's Vinian. All right, so we'll skip this part. We'll go to review. And you can see the CEO, Steve Huffman, is quite happy ringing the bell at the stock exchange. So I used to work right across the street from the stock exchange at Citibank. Reddit shares jumped 48% in their debut on Thursday in the first initial public offering for a major social media company since Pinterest hit the market in 2019. The 19-year-old website, I didn't know Reddit was that old. The 19-year-old website that hosts millions of online forums priced its IPO on Wednesday at $34 a share, but they did better than that, you'll see. The top of the expected range. Reddit and selling shareholders raised about $750 million from the offering, with the company collecting about $519 million. So good for them. The stock opened at $47, so much better than the 34, and reached a high of $57.80, marking a 70% increase at its peak for the day. It closed at $50.44, giving the company a market cap of about $9.5 billion. So good for them. They did a lot better than they thought they'd do, I gather. Trading under ticket symbol RDDT, Reddit is testing investor appetite for new tech stocks after an extended dry spell for IPOs. Yeah, it's been a while. Since the peak of the technology boom in late 2021, hardly any venture-backed tech companies have gone public, and those that have, like Instacart and Klaviyo last year, have underwhelmed. Yeah, I remember when Instacart went IPO, and I haven't heard a thing about it since. So, yeah, I guess it was underwhelming. On Wednesday, data center hardware company Astera Labs made its public market debut on NASDAQ, and so its shares saw 72%, underscoring investor excitement over businesses tied to the surge in artificial intelligence. Yeah, when I worked for Payne Weber, I worked on NASDAQ stocks, or my programming was. At its IPO price, Reddit was valued at $6.5 billion, a haircut from the company's private market valuation of $10 billion in 2021. Well, yeah, that was the boom for everybody, which was a boom year for the tech industry. The mood changed in 2022 as rising interest rates and soaring inflation pushed investors out of high-risk assets. Startups responded by conducting layoffs, trimming their valuations, and shifting their focus to profit over growth. Reddit's annual sales for 2023 rose 20% to $804 million from $666.7 million a year earlier. Well, good for them. The company detailed in its prospectus, the company recorded a net loss of $90.8 million last year, narrower than the loss of $158.6 million in 2022. So, yeah, last year was better than the year before. Based on its revenue over the past 4 quarters, Reddit's market cap at IPO gave it a price-to-sales ratio of about 8, so 8 times what it's worth, which is good. Alphabet trades for 6.1 times revenue. Meta has a multiple of 9.7. That's really good. Pinterest sits at 7.5, and Snap trades at 3.9 times sales, according to FactSet. So 8 times better than the market. That's pretty good. In addition to those companies, Reddit also counts X, Discord, Wikipedia, and Amazon's Twitch streaming service as competitors in its prospectus. Reddit is betting that data licensing could become a major source of revenue. I wonder how that'll affect the company. And said in its filing that it's entered certain data licensing arrangements with an aggregate contract value of $203 million and terms ranging from 2 to 3 years. This year, Reddit said it plans to recognize roughly $66.4 million in revenue as part of its data licensing deals. Interesting. Google has also entered into an expanded partnership with Reddit, allowing the search giant to obtain more access to Reddit data to train AI models and improve its price. Yeah, I could see where they could get some good data from Reddit for its large language models. Reddit revealed on March 15th that the Federal Trade Commission is conducting a non-public inquiry, at least they're open about it, focused on our sale, licensing, or sharing of user-generated content with third parties to train AI models like they're doing with Google. Reddit said it was not surprised that the FTC has expressed interest in the company's data licensing practices related to AI, and that it doesn't believe that it has engaged in any unfair or deceptive trade practice. Yeah, the fact that they're so upfront about it, I think, is a very good thing. Reddit was founded in 2005 by technology entrepreneurs Alex Ohanian and Steve Huffman, the company's CEO. Existing stakeholders include Huffman, sold a combined 6.7 million shares in the IPO. As part of the IPO, Reddit gave some of its top moderators and users, known as Redditors, a chance to buy stock through a directed share program. Companies like Airbnb, Doximity, and Rivian have used similar programs to reward their power users and customers. I hope they believe in Reddit and support Reddit, Huffman told CNBC in an interview on Thursday. But the goal is just to get them in the deal, just like any professional investor. Redditors have expressed skepticism about the IPO, because they had so many issues, both because of the company's financials and its often troubled relationship with moderators. Yeah, they had a lot of issues with moderators a year and a half ago. Huffman said he recognizes that reality and acknowledged the controversial subreddit Wall Street Bets, which helped spawn the surge in meme stocks like GameStop. That's the beautiful thing about Reddit, is that they tell it like it is. Yeah, I like their openness, Huffman says, but you have to remember that they're doing that on Reddit. It's a platform they love. It's their home on the internet. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is one of Reddit's major shareholders, along with Tencent. Okay, Tencent's big Chinese company, I do believe, and Advance Magazine Publishers, the parent company of publishing giant Condé Nast. So they've got some Chinese, they've got some European, they've got a little bit of everybody. Altman's stake in the company was worth over $400 million before the stock began trading. Altman led a $50 million funding round into Reddit in 2014 and was a member of its board from 2015 to 2022. So I'm glad they got their IPO, and let's hope they do well from here on out, because they've been a bit of a roller coaster the last couple of years. So nothing new in the comments, so we will head to my last story. Now I've got to switch over to Microsoft. I just said, meanwhile, Microsoft brings in DeepMind co-founder to head the consumer AI division, and this was on TechCrunch. So Microsoft is really into AI with both feet. Microsoft hires Inflection founders, that's the name of the company they hired them from, to run new consumer AI division. Microsoft led a $1.3 billion funding in Inflection, so they helped start that company, AI, last year. So, and this was by Manish Singh, and this was 3 days ago. So, review. Microsoft has hired Mustafa Suleiman and Karen Simonian, co-founders of high-profile AI startup Inflection AI, and several of their colleagues in one of the strangest deals as the Satya Nadella-led cloud giant continues its aggressive push to attract top talent. Yeah, they're very serious about their AI. Suleiman, also a co-founder of DeepMind, which Google bought in 2014 to bolster its own AI efforts, will run Microsoft's newly formed consumer AI unit called Microsoft AI, whereas Simonian is joining the company as a chief scientist in the same group. Mustafa, whose official title at Microsoft is EVP and CEO of Microsoft AI, will report to Chief Executive Nadella. Well, that makes sense. Microsoft is expected to highlight its latest AI advances for consumers in an event focused on Microsoft Copilot. Boy, are they pushing that. I can hardly sign on to either of my computers without telling me to try Copilot. Windows and Surface on Thursday. Inflection AI is no stranger to Microsoft. The cloud giant led a $1.3 billion funding round in the startup less than a year ago. At the time of the funding, Inflection AI said it is building the world's largest AI cluster, featuring 22,000 NVIDIA H100 GPUs. Suleiman will also lead AI products and research for Copilot, Bing, and Edge, he wrote in a tweet. So it's a big deal already. Several members of the Inflection team have chosen, so they brought some of their team with them, have chosen to join Mustafa and Karen at Microsoft, Nadella wrote in a blog post. They included some of the most accomplished AI engineers, researchers, and builders in the world. They have designed, led, launched, and co-authored many of the most important contributions in advancing AI over the last 5 years. Inflection AI is one of the most prominent AI startups. It was founded in 2022 by LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman and Suleiman, and had sought to develop AI systems that can engage in open-ended dialogue, answer questions, and assist with a variety of tasks. Huffman said all investors in Inflection AI will have a good outcome today, and I anticipate good future upside. Sean White, co-founder of BrainGels, will be taking over as the chief executive of Inflection AI. Hoffman said, Suleiman will have his hands full at Microsoft. In a blog post, Inflection AI said it will shift its focus to the AI studio business, where it builds and tests consumer generative AI models. This renewed emphasis on our API also comes with some important changes in the company, wrote Inflection AI. As part of that transition situation, Inflection AI said it would host Inflection 2.5 on Microsoft Azure. Boy, they are tied in with Microsoft. Something it said will help reach creators everywhere. And I think that makes sense because I think Microsoft Azure is only second to Amazon's. So I think they're like the second biggest in the world. It will also be ensuring it comes to other cloud hosting platforms in the near future. The API itself isn't available today, but will be up and running very soon. Microsoft appears to have been working on the new AI unit for some time. Nadella had offered to hire OpenAI co-founder Sam Altman and Greg Brockman when they temporarily exited the startup in December. Yes, and at the time, they were willing to take other people along with those two from OpenAI. So they did the same thing here. Nadella said today the firm and the world is only in its second year of the AI platform shift, and Microsoft must ensure we have the capability and capacity to boldly innovate. Well, Microsoft is out front, and I guess they intend to stay there. So, all right, I'm going to stop screen. That was my last story. Okay, nothing new in the comments. So, hey, by myself, at least we've made it past 9 o'clock. We got through all the stories. Hopefully, I've given you guys a few articles that you didn't hear about before, and hopefully you found them interesting. I think that Neuralink story was pretty cool for the guy with who's paralyzed below the shoulders. So, happy for him. So that's the show for today. Now, next week, we'll have a show, but I'm also moving next weekend. So the show may be a little bit abbreviated, or I'll do the best I can, but there will be a show next week. I just wanted to let you guys know that. And thanks for everybody who stuck around for tonight's stories. Thanks for anybody new who was in here who didn't say anything, but hopefully next time you will. And I will see you guys next week. I hope everybody has a very, very blessed weekend. And we'll see you next week. Maybe we'll even get Ted back. Who knows? All right, here comes our usual pregnant pause. Remember, folks, we all do better when we love each other.